Cora, welcome to the Impact Series podcast. I'm lucky enough to be joined today by Jacqueline Comer and Rebecca Lee. And today we're going to be talking about the general health of the social spaces which we all share on the internet and through social media, and investigating some of the ways that we can potentially change these for the better and find out what we can do as we all play our part in this ever-evolving space. So firstly, Jacqueline, tell me where this all began for you.
So I'm going to make a TLDR. It will be a long story short. So I started thinking about, the health of social media and the health of the discourse on social media a couple of years ago when I was working with some friends who are now my co-founders of the company, but we're working on how we might protect women, potential candidates running for political office, how we might help them feel safer online. What we heard with, talking to a lot of women who were really great potential candidates for office and talking to them about, why are you not wanting to run? They would all tell us, amongst other reasons, that they were afraid of social media, that they were afraid of putting themselves and their families in the line of fire. And so this technology was born out of that, and we'll talk about that technology later. But this invention came about from that, and from there, I kind of always had that in the background in my brain. And I started doing my master's of tech futures. I think it was November. Again, time means nothing now. What was it? November 2020. Rebecca, I'm looking at you. 2019. I don't even know. Yeah, that's right. 2019. And I was sort of, roaming around different topics, not really landing on anything. And I got quite far into the whole master's program. And at the same time, I used the same technology that we use in Canada to help women feel supported on social media when they're running for office, and ran that technology called Parity Bot in New Zealand. And from there, I just saw the amazing effects that technology had, and how you can actually start to change discourse and make people feel safe, and actually influence society, really, just by using technology and making people feel safe. And that sort of spurred me on to actually, maybe I should look at my master's in another way, and look at the social space and how we might use technology to make the social media more equitable, positive, inclusive. That was the TLDR.
Well said. And Rebecca, how about you? I know also from reading both of your reports that you submitted as part of the Masters of Technological Futures, that yours took quite a pivot as well towards more of a social justice angle, Rebecca.
Yeah. So for me, again, I think like everybody in our cohort, we all started off researching one topic and then went into something else. So I started with a different kind of social issue, and I looked at banking and financial services and how you can support those kind of in financial difficulties, and using technology for that. But quickly realized, because I work in financial services, if I was doing financial services in my day job and then doing financial services in my master's, I was just going to quite quickly feel like all I was doing was working in my job. So what was great about what Tech Futures Lab did was got me to think about, what are the things I'm passionate about? What are the things I really enjoy? I spend a lot of time, and always have spent a lot of time, watching sport, whether that's on TV, whether that's going to live events. So that really, I guess, took me to my first pivot, which was all about going, well, let's look at sports, and let's look at the sports fan experience, because what I really enjoy is looking at consumer experiences and how you can solve problems for those. And then as I went along that journey, and did a lot of research, particularly when looking at women's sports. There's a lot of kind of social justice issues around that, just around equality. Some of the things we've been looking at together with Jacqueline in terms of the social media abuse of female athletes, and just having that level playing field and having people, really understand and buy into women's sports, just in the same way as they do in any other sport. That's just ignited such a passion for me. I'm now pursuing that as a doctorate, and going on to look at, women's sports and technology, and how we can use technology to, really enhance those women's sports live experiences and actually bring what is an awesome quality product and event to a much bigger audience, and really change the dialogue around women's sports. So I think there's so much opportunity there. And during my master's, I got to totally fangirl out and meet a whole range of different people, which was just absolutely amazing. But yeah, I think some of the things that really resonated with me were some of those kind of social justice elements, whether you look at that's kind of the misogyny in sport, the racial abuse, the homophobia, the list kind of goes on, unfortunately. And I think what's been really pleasing in my master's, and also collaborating with Jacqueline, is being able to shine a light on some of these issues through some of the blogging that we've done. And I've had so many people come up to me and say, I didn't realize some of the things I was saying, had this impact. So that's been super interesting. So yeah, again, a long story for a short tale.
That's fine. So I know in your report, Rebecca, I think you quote Donald Trump and some of the challenges of mixing politics and sport. And obviously, Jacqueline, your background was in creating Parity Bot, which is based on politics, and yours was in sports, Rebecca. So how did these two worlds collide on the Masters of Technological Futures course? And what was the conversation that started you off realizing that you could collaborate together?
Yeah, so I mean, I think for me, it was we'd had a session where we'd all done a bit of a mini update on our projects, and I really enjoyed what Jacqueline was saying and talking about and learning more about the Parity Bot and what it could do and what it had done in the work that ARETO had done in Canada to support some of those female politicians. So I was, a few days later, sitting in my garden, typing up the next phase of my report. And I suddenly thought, well, hold on, I was looking at all of these issues with female athletes in particular and looking at the social media abuse they face. And I thought, well, hold on, there's an opportunity here to actually have a whole range of different use cases for Parity Bot within sports. So, just connected with Jacqueline and say, hey, what do you think about this? And we met up in a wine bar and had a couple of glasses of wine and a bit of a chat. And it really just went from there. I think we both saw the opportunity, and Jacqueline's also got a bit of a background in sports journalism. So I think that resonated with her as well.
So if we rewind a little bit and talk about that Twitter space and what the Parity Bot actually is, I've reinstated my Twitter account about 6 months ago, I think, after not using it for perhaps 2 or 3 years. And it felt like to me, everyone was just shouting. It seemed like everybody was all caps. It seemed really aggressive. It seemed like a lot had changed over the couple of years that I'd put Twitter down and rejoined. So how did that sort of evolve into your space with the Parity Bot, Jacqueline?
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about social media is, 10 years ago, it was, this fun thing where you got to share, photos with, someone you went to high school with that you forgot existed. And now it is actually a tool for people's jobs. And when we think about politicians, when we think about athletes, when we think about journalists, influencers, like social media is a workplace for a lot of people. And when you have that lens and look at what's happened with social media, especially I guess over the last 2 years, I think just by virtue of everyone being stuck in their homes and the only human contact you have is perhaps on a screen or on your phone, that people are expressing their feelings quite loudly and quite toxically on social media. And in 2019, when Parity Bot first ran in an election, it was it was sort of a new news that social media is toxic, and that, you know, any equity seeking group trying to break into a space, social media is a really great tool because it's free and it's got massive reach. But the consequences of that is that, you know, you open yourself up to trolls and attacks, and there's no sort of mediation around that. And so that was brand new, and people were like, well, is this really even a problem? And in 2021, it's only 2 years since we first launched it. And I think it was Man United's noticed a 350% increase in online abuse over 2 years. This year, they reported, like the stats are incredible. I think women journalists, it was, I think around 75% of women journalists have experienced abuse online, and 25 have said that it's, you know, trickled over into offline abuse. It is now just the reality of a lot of people's days, and it is getting worse. And I think there is an organization, I think it was Amnesty International, will be coming out with a report. I think it's tomorrow. I'm just looking at the date. About how well Twitter is actually doing with keeping up with abuse, and how well that they're addressing it. Or, you know, this will be I might be breaking the rules here, but they're not doing well. So this is a news flash. Twitter is not doing well with addressing the issue, and, you know, that the abuse is, you know, not just on Twitter, it's also everywhere. It's on, you know, Discord, it's on Facebook, it's on Instagram, and abuse equals misinformation and disinformation too. I mean, all of this stuff is, you know, really toxic use of language that we've just accepted as, you know, I guess that's just the way it is. And if you have to be on there, that's your problem, which is not a great way to roll.
Yeah, it reminds me of that More Than Mean campaign, and I think, Rebecca, you wrote about that in your report, where you had female sports commentators sitting opposite men who read out tweets that were on Twitter directed, you know, at that sports presenter, and it was quite astounding just to watch these men read it in real life, face to face. They couldn't look the people in the eye, and I think things have developed in a way that you're hidden by this mask, aren't you, online? And it sort of you feel like you can have the right to say anything, but quite often the impacts of those things that you're saying are far beyond maybe you intended it or maybe you didn't, but you can never tell where it's going. So yeah, that's something that I think has really hit home for me. One of the themes that you talk about is around microaggressions, and I was wondering if you could explain a bit about how that interacts in an online space.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess, you know, to say up front, microaggression is definitely a misnomer. There's no such thing as really a microaggression. An aggression is an aggression. When you say something horrible to someone, even if you don't use profanity, it still cuts deep. When we launched and ran Parity Bot NZ in New Zealand it would have been last year's election, just again, trying to figure out what year we're in. In last year's election, when we were looking at the data after, we noticed that our language model didn't pick up any instances of anyone using the term Cindy as being toxic. And we know that the term Cindy for the Prime Minister is definitely a sexist term. Even calling her Auntie Cindy, it is diminishing of who she is and the position that she's in. And we saw, okay, our language model is actually not surfacing this. It is technically a microaggression. It's nuanced. It is maybe for some people unconscious, maybe for some people it's definitely a conscious aggression. And so then we started to look at the data that we had from the US election from last year and from one of the deployments in Canada, and we found some similar findings that certain name calling Kamala, calling Kamala Harris Kamala, and calling one of the environment minister in Canada. She's not the environment minister anymore, but she's a blonde woman, and they called her Climate Barbie. Three different terms that certainly would not seem on the surface to be toxic language, and yet, in the context of talking about them, about women in power, it's definitely, an aggression. It's definitely toxic language. And so my project actually ended up being, how might we use technology to actually find microaggressions in text, like in conversations on Twitter. And so, how do you do it? It's not easy because language is highly nuanced and it's completely contextual. And so, when you think about trying to get a machine to do some shortcuts for you, because that's really what Parity Bot does. Parity Bot is a shortcut. We call it now ProBot now, but it's a shortcut to get to basically be able to crunch through millions of data points all at once and be able to make a decision on whether something is a toxic use of language or not. And a human can do that too. It would just take a really long time. So when we're thinking about microaggressions and trying to do the same thing, what we're trying to do is train a machine to recognize contextual nuanced language, which I'm finding is a very, very tricky problem. I mean, I was working with a PhD student, and we built a microaggressions model, and we were able to surface microaggressions, some gendered microaggressions in text. But we also actually created quite an emo model. It was, we overfed it with negativity. And so it was starting to score everything as negative. And so just recently, actually, we've been playing around a little bit and trying to find more neutral language to feed into it so that it was not scoring everything as a microaggression. But again, it's an extremely challenging problem because, so much of the language we use, we don't understand, the etymology. We don't know where the words came from. We don't know how they've been used in the past, maybe to hurt some people. I mean, there's a lot of weight with every word that we use. And so it's really trying to figure out how to build a data set that doesn't contain any bias, which is, again, how do you do that? And get representation from across society to be able to say, here's this sentence. Do you think that's a toxic sentence? Do you think that's an aggression? Do you think that's an aggression? So that you get, a more representative sample of labelers to put a more representative data set together to then train your model to hopefully be able to surface these microaggressions. So all that to say, it's hard. It's a very, very big challenge. But it's so necessary to be able to educate people about, what language can do. I mean, I called my report "Death by 1,000 Cuts." I mean, one paper cut's not going to kill you, but if you're constantly getting all of these, the color black is a really great example. If you're constantly getting barraged with examples of the color black as being a negative thing, that just starts to get you. And so how might we use technology to be able to recognize those and maybe push back and educate people on what that is?
It's such a complex challenge, but a completely necessary one. Like you say, these are the places of work for many people, and you can't avoid it. The learning that's had to be done on the AI side is obviously complicated. What sort of learning have you both had to do yourselves through this? Have you sort of been challenged in the way that you think and approach the world?
I think for me, there's in terms of the way I think and approach the world, I think what this whole process has done is give me so much more confidence in, I think, two ways. I think firstly, and maybe part of it is being in New Zealand, or maybe part of it is just being tenacious, is actually just going out there and just approaching people. And I think if you can go out there and say, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, this is what I'm looking at, this is what I need from you, or I'd like to talk to you and get your input or thoughts. I've been just overwhelmed by the volume of people just all around the world, frankly, who've actually just taken the time to have a call. And, most of those people, if they can't help themselves, they will say, hey, I know X, Y, and Z at such and such an organization. They might be interested in sponsoring, or you should talk to this athlete, or, they're more than happy to kind of connect you in with others. So I think for me, that's just been one thing I've really learned, which is just to just do it. Just don't wait. Just do it. Start talking to people, start asking questions, and you will get a lot more people saying yes than you will no. And I think the other thing that I've really learned is really just, I think the power of media, and just the power of media to get your message across, and the level of interest that there is. And again, it's just talking to various reporters or like-minded people who are interested in shining a light on these social justice issues, and who want to contribute and who want to make a difference. And their support again goes beyond just collaborating on a story. It's who else can they introduce us to, who can actually help, who might be interested in solving this problem. And again, just the reception that we've had when we've, just essentially cold called people, frankly, has been really amazing. So, absolutely, it's really made me think around in the future, not to hesitate, just go out there and ask. And somebody will help, someone will answer your call. So that's been the biggest thing for me.
To be fair, Rebecca is very tenacious, and is like, it's one of her greatest qualities. She's like, what? People are people. They're either going to say yes or they're going to say no.
Yeah.
And it really has been amazing. I've learned a lot just watching how she approaches this, and it's really people are people, just talking to people as though they might also potentially care or know someone who does. And I think what's been amazing through this whole journey has been how many people are actually thinking about and caring about the same things we are. They're maybe not doing anything about it or don't know how to. But like when we talk about this in the media, or, we talk to somebody new where, somebody's contacted Rebecca, or Rebecca's, found a great contact, and we talk to them, people are really enthusiastic about helping out. And I think we hear so much. I mean, what we look at every day is awful. My job is, looking at this really awful data. We've just started following a whole bunch of athletes to get an understanding of the level of toxicity in sport, and, where's it coming from, and that sort of thing. And it's horrible. Like, it's people will say very, very, very horrible things to each other. But at the same time, while we're seeing like the worst of humanity, I think that and we hear about that a lot, there's also so much good stuff where people really want to work together to solve these problems. And, I was a creative director. I was a writer by trade. I used to be an ice hockey journalist. And now I presented a poster about a research paper on AI in a conference about algorithms with a whole bunch of scientists. Have I learned anything? I've learned a lot. But what I've learned is really like, you yourself don't have to know how to do everything. You just need to know which questions to ask, and, talk to people, and they will help you they will give you some knowledge to help you go to the next step and the next step. And, of course, I've had to do a deep dive into, a few subjects, like, being able to talk about machine learning with my engineers is quite the feat. But there's a lot of problems to solve in the world. There are a lot of problems to solve, but there's a lot of people to help you solve it. And, none of us are alone. I mean, Rebecca and I, it was, hey, this would be cool to work together. And then we did. And then we were, in the news, and then people were coming to us, and it was like, is it really that easy? And I think it is. I mean, the technology is, and it's just, being tenacious and going for it is, it's a really good lesson learned.
So that you've talked about the next steps now, and you're both working with ARETO Labs. Can you tell us about the projects that are sort of really, hopefully, making a big difference now?
Oh, yeah. So right now at ARETO, we are really focused on getting that ProBot product out into market, and figure out a way to scale it, to be able to help more organizations protect the mental health of their employees. So when we think about, sports, it would be, either the players on your team, or from a sponsor's perspective, it would be, some of those athlete influencers, and, protecting them against the hate that they're getting on social media, because they have in their contract that they need to post a certain amount of times every year to satisfy their sponsorship contract. And so, yeah, we're really pushing we're looking at sports and journalism. Those are two big industries that we're looking at right now. I think sports is a sexy one. It's, some of the biggest names in the world, are garnering a lot of hate, and really, sort of bringing out the worst in people. And so we really want to start to look at that. And then, when we're thinking about journalists and the danger of what online hate can do for those people, not only, are we talking about, the mental health effects of online abuse and burnout for journalists, but also if you are a woman, or a woman of color, or a person from the LGBTQ community, like any sort of intersection in society, and you are trying to tell stories that are important to you and your community, chances are you're getting more abuse than other people online. And the danger of not addressing online abuse in journalism is that you only have one perspective of stories around the world, from one part of the world, about one small segment of society. And there's a major danger in terms of what we know about the world, what's actually going on, and the perspectives and of different people, and how that might affect decisions that we make, laws that we write, charities where they move money. I mean, there's so many, major societal issues that go in hand if you don't have a representative media. And so really, we're really looking at launching our technology there, and really getting our microaggressions model going, which will be great, just to start testing it out in real life and see what happens, and start to have robust conversations with researchers as well as industry, in terms of how can we start thinking about our language algorithms in different ways to make sure that they are representative. So just a few things.
Well, you talk about the urgency of this challenge, and it's really clear that people, or the most important voices, will often withdraw from the conversation, won't they? Because they get abuse and they feel negative about themselves, and they think, I'm going to get rid of this, I'm deleting my account, I'm off. Lots of people have done that in social media because of those very things. And you just end up with diminishing voices, and you end up with the majority rule, the white male telling everybody with the, from the highest point with the loudest voice, just taking over into this huge echo chamber. So it's so urgent, this work.
Absolutely.
That you're pursuing and pushing here. Can you tell me a bit about the actual process? So say a female tennis player posts a tweet. How does it work?
Do you want to explain?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So yeah, and just to follow on from your previous comment, actually, Tim, you are seeing from an athlete perspective, athletes leaving social media all the time. And I talk quite a bit about the kind of catch-22 of that in terms of women's sports. So you have a lot of female athletes that either do not get paid or do not get paid anything like the male counterparts. And they rely a lot on social media to kind of build their brand or help fund them actually do their sports. So, for example, in the last Olympics, you had people, there was a weightlifter from the Philippines, and she went out on her Instagram and asked for financial support so she could actually fund her ability to go to the Olympics, which is crazy. And she got the support, but that's the athletes do have this relationship with social media where they need the support and they need to kind of communicate with fans. And I think then when you think about that communication and you look at it, there's so much that's positive and you want to kind of enhance that. But equally, when we kind of looked at the problem statement for athletes, it's how do you actually engage in that conversation in potentially a fun way, to perhaps join in a bit of the banter, or how do you actually need to engage with different kinds of fan groups? So in terms of how the tech works, so if you say, send a tweet to Serena Williams that might be racist, for example. Unfortunately, Serena gets a lot of racist tweets. The Fair Play bot will analyze that, will identify that as a toxic tweet, and then it can respond in any way that you actually want. So we could actually respond back into the thread and just send a positive message back to Serena saying, hey, you go, you're a champion, you're a queen, whatever that is. And you might then see other fans just jump on the back of that tweet and then change the negative discourse into actually a positive discourse. Or you might just want to respond directly to the person who sent the negative tweet, or you might just want to send something out that's not directly in the thread at all. So there's lots of design choices, and I think that's what's great about the work that ARETO have done with this. The people who are being abused, or the clubs or the governing bodies who are supporting those athletes who are being abused, actually have a lot of power and control to select how they want to engage with their fans, and engage with the people who are not fans, who are trolling. Because a big learning for me is different sports groups and different sports fan groups interact with themselves and with the players in vastly different ways. So if you look at the language that might be used from a tennis fan perspective and then to a football fan perspective, it's vastly different. To Jacqueline's earlier point, identifying those comments that are aggressions versus of like what is more supportive, but maybe using certain types of language that could also be associated with aggressions. You have to identify the nuance of that. So that's pretty interesting. But yeah, I think, how does it work? It works in any way you want it to support your athletes, is really the bottom line.
So it can be seen as something to empower people, the people who are tweeting, and help them through a positive way, but equally can be a learning tool for people who may be saying something and not realizing that that's a microaggression, or it's not necessarily in a way which is supposed to be negative, but it can be taken in a negative way. And also engaging with the people who are doing it in a negative way and just saying, this isn't how we should be acting and behaving in this online and public space. Yeah, it's amazing technology. I did have a look on the Parity Bot NZ and look at some of the tweets that were aimed at Jacinda, I think, around the election process. And it was things along the lines of, thank you for running. We want more women as leaders in politics. When women succeed, New Zealand succeeds. Keep on keeping on. We need more people like you in politics. And I think, that would have a knock-on effect of people joining in and, being positive, which gives me this idea. I think you both mentioned it around this general health of the social online space. How do we go about measuring that? Is there a way for people to be aware of this big toxic bubble that we're existing in and how we can combat that? Have you explored that as a sort of holistic, big space that we all share?
Yeah, I mean, I might let Jacqueline answer that, but just for my 10 cents worth, doing my doctorate in this space, it's something that I'm going to be looking at as part of my thesis. And I think and Jacqueline alluded to it before, like the context is kind of super important, because there's a heck of a lot of good stuff and positivity and really great things that can happen with these conversations, and you don't want to take away from that. And I think you touched on it, Tim. It's that kind of opportunity to educate and really understand at that holistic level is, well, who are these people that are sending out this kind of toxicity, and what's kind of almost needed to support them in some ways, right? How do we actually identify that, and how do you actually engage in that kind of discourse? Because when you do look at it, and I had a look recently at some tweets that were sent during the FA Cup final, the Women's FA Cup final in the UK. And I looked at the profiles of some of the individuals sending this stuff, and you go and you look at the history of their tweets, and it's like, but you've sent out a whole bunch of like really nice, normal tweets, and then you felt compelled for some unknown reason to just jump in and say something derogatory about this event that you didn't need to respond to. And you look at it and I think it's actually about understanding. And Jacqueline's comment earlier around how, Manchester United has seen that dramatic increase in abuse. It's looking at that type of thing thematically and understanding, well, what is it? There's COVID. There's increased stress because people are working at home. There's people that are losing their jobs. There's high inflation. There's yada yada. There's all these different things. That's like a drip, 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 drip. So I think your point's a good one around looking at that holistically. And I'll let Jacqueline talk more about what ARETO is doing there, which is awesome.
Thanks, Rebecca. That's the big question is how do we measure the health of a community? And we're starting to look into that, actually, just trying to come up with, what's that ARETO score, so that we can say that, the health of this community is 63.7. I mean, I'm totally making up a number, but taking into consideration the health of the engagement, and the sentiment, in that community. If we're looking at, tennis, for example, and we can look at a whole bunch of tennis athletes and follow their social media accounts and look at the comments they're getting, and what sort of comments are getting high engagement, what sorts of posts are getting a lot of negative feedback, which athletes are getting a lot of toxicity, and we can start to take all of that information and create some sort of score to be able to say, actually your community is really great and it's this score, but maybe here's some things that you can do. And so part of the work that ProBot can do is actually, like, we not only do that front end stuff, which is big because it's protecting people's mental health and the perceived sense of safety online, and hopefully making online spaces more equitable, but we also have like really rich data collection in the background. So, you can see we have, live dashboards of what's going on in an online community. So we can see who's getting the most hate and what, are we getting a lot of, sexualized content being sent to somebody, or how are the BIPOC athletes doing today? And we can kind of see what's going on in a community in real time. It almost looks like at the dashboard of inside a plane. You can see where all the dials are turned, but then also take all of that data and start to really analyze that. It'd be great to. And we've told Rebecca for her doctorate that we've got all this data that she can do a deep dive into and really research different communities and different slice and dice to all sorts of different ways to get a better understanding of where the problems are, what are the context, what's the context around these blips that we see, and really start to understand that behavior so that we can make recommendations to either organizations or government or anyone to start to really change, or even the platforms to start to change some of that behavior in the product design.
Yeah, it almost needs to happen at that platform level, doesn't it, to be able to support big change and influence. I mean, essentially you're fighting the algorithms that have been set up automatically already, or not automatically, but intentionally already, to direct different content to different people. You're trying to fight the top really by disrupting that. I think that would be an absolutely amazing thing to be able to see. It's almost, when you look at perhaps the stock market and you see things like the fear and greed index, and it lets you know, it's extreme fear at the moment, everyone's selling, it's a good time to probably buy. If it's an extreme level where necessarily people are being negative online, everyone needs to make a better effort to make it a bit more of a positive place and support people in feeling good about themselves and others. So it's a really interesting area to look into as it goes on. So thinking about the future and thinking about the next steps of where this could go, what ideas about that? Where is this going to end up, hopefully?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I said earlier today in a meeting was that one thing I would love is that in every single sports contract with, an athlete and a big organization, a big sponsor, a big brand, there's a rider in every single contract that says that, we really appreciate your audience and we are going to protect you online using this technology so that, if you're abused, we have your back. We'll be pushing back, encouraging, a more positive discourse around you. Don't worry. If we could get onto every contract and have a writer in every contract, then I feel like we're starting to win, because that means that, those with power are starting to understand the effects that online abuse has on, regular people and the ripple effects that has, and are actually starting to take it seriously and start to see social media as a workplace and, trying to build healthier, more equitable workspaces or workplaces for everyone. So that's my dream for the future. I'm not sure what the other founders of ARETO would say, but that's it for me.
Yeah, I think for me, these problems are just significant, and I think what would be a dream scenario would be to have all of those key stakeholders actually start engaging and working together. I think one of the challenges that we found is we almost are needing to be the catalyst, or we're almost needing to be that facilitator of the conversation and get kind of government, get governing bodies, get clubs, get athletes, get players unions, get sponsors, like the kind of list goes on, to kind of join together in a joined up conversation, because everyone owns part of the solution. It's not just one lever that you can necessarily pull, I think, to solve this at a system level. But I think part of that challenge is getting all those groups to align, one. And then the second piece is, any solution is going to require kind of investment, whether that's in tools, like Parity Bot or other tools to actually drive this change through. And I think in these times that's quite challenging. So I think it really is, for me, what will be a massive win, I think, at this stage is starting that conversation. How can we get some of those groups together and people to join up and have that joined up conversation and start thinking how we can drive this change, because it requires that joined up piece to solve it, I think, to be honest.
So what can people do to help?
Yeah, Tim, look, I think there's a lot of different things that people could do, both on a personal level and also if they want to actually get involved in this. I think, personally, if you're seeing these types of aggressions that are happening in social media, I think it's actually just, helping shine a light, helping educate and helping kind of, just say that's not okay. If you see something in your gut and you think that's not okay, well, just say it's not okay, and help kind of shine that light for us. And I think on a different level, in terms of actually, if you think what Jacqueline or I've said today is something that you want to get behind, then reach out to us, because as I said before, you may know somebody, or you myself may be able to help and get involved and help continue to shine a light and just raise the awareness. So there's so much that we need to do. And as I said before, so many different stakeholders we need to engage. New Zealand's a village, so you may be able to help more than you think. So just reach out to us.
And anything from you, Jacqueline, what else can people do to support the cause?
Well, everything that Rebecca said would be fantastic. Call out your uncle if your uncle is a jerk on Facebook. Just say, come on, Uncle Tim, that's not okay. And yeah, reach out to Rebecca and I. And also, I'm just going to plug us. We are, ARETO Labs is currently doing a fundraise. And so if you're a venture capitalist or an angel investor and are looking to invest in a purpose-driven venture, then reach out to me and I'd love to talk.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Thanks, Rebecca. It's been absolutely brilliant talking to you today. I loved reading through your reports, and it was even more of a pleasure to speak to you both face to face. So hopefully the people listening to this also gain as much as I have from this conversation. It's been great to have my eyes opened a bit wider about the online space and what we can all do and the part that we all play in making it a safer place for everybody, and just ensuring that the right voices are always heard and not silenced through actions, whether they're conscious or unconscious. Those things have big effects and massive ripple-ons for lots of people. So thank you so much for your time. Really look forward to following the story at ARETO Labs. We'll leave all the links beneath this podcast on the page where it's published on the Tech Futures site, and we'll look forward to hearing how this progresses. Take care. Ngā mihi nui kia kōrua.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
See ya. Bye-bye.